Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We will call the meeting to order. Welcome to our first hot summer meeting, which I'm very comfortable today. Everybody else might be hot, but I'm good. The board did meet in closed session, and we do have a reportable. In accordance with Administrative Procedure 5502, the board received a recommendation from the superintendent president to expel student 000766316 for actions displayed on March 18, 2015. The board voted unanimously to accept the superintendent's recommendation. Would you all stand and join me in the pledge to our flag? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball.
Okay, so if anybody sees Megan jump out and he's feeling fine or there in the corner.
She's crawling.
Let me know so I can get it on video.
Terry's gonna get it all on film. We can send it to Funniest Videos, Megan, we might win some money. Per board policy 2350, any person may address the board at this time either on an agenda item or other matters of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. A maximum of 5 minutes is allowed for each speaker, with a maximum time of 15 minutes per item unless otherwise extended by the board. Do we have any public comments concerning items on the agenda? Seeing none, do we have any public comments concerning items not on the agenda? Okay. Moving on, we'll start with our board and executive staff reports. We do not have a student trustee report. Do we have any board member reports? Seeing none, we'll move right to our financial report. Mr. Foster.
Hello, everyone. And I got a number for you, $247,187. That's the funding decision that the COS Foundation Board has made on 22 projects that were submitted for funding by the COS Foundation. We had more than $750,000 worth of projects. What you have in front of you is a detailed list of those projects, the project names and the amounts, and sort of the areas in which they came from. The new proposals, the funding of ongoing projects that are transcending one fiscal year. And this also marks the first year that the COS Foundation has funded out of the group of above base projects that were submitted through the district's above base request process. So we were able to fund one of the projects out of that. The projects range from $1,500 to $48,945, and they're projects for sponsoring a COS event to capital projects. And so that's the second year in a row that we've done this process, and the foundation has already committed $150,000 for the next round of projects, the 2016-2017 projects. So at least $150,000 will be made available during that cycle, and those applications will begin in August. So that's the good news.
Porterhouse acoustical treatment. That's going to be available.
Yes.
And people can quit complaining.
Exactly. Certainly before basketball season, and hopefully before Hall of Fame. I also want to share some not as pleasant news that the COS Regatta on May 14th was a limited success. We were down about 70 people. The weather, if you remember that day, the weather was just horrific, and we had a very windy day on a day that we were trying to sail sailboats across the pool, and so we had a great crowd of the people that were there. It was a great crowd, and thank you, Ken, for being there with us there and pushing your boat along and that type of thing. It was hilarious. But at the end of the day, we still netted $13,000 from it. We had just 2 fewer boats than last year, but we had 70 fewer attendees. And $13,000 is $1,800 below goal and $3,200 below last year. So it wasn't too bad, but definitely weather had an effect. The Regatta Task Force will assess the outcomes of this event and determine what changes for next year need to be made. And besides that, we have a couple of upcoming, out in the distance event dates, which is the Crush Party at the Tulare Center on September 25th and the COS Hall of Fame on October 8th.
questions? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item D, and that will be on accreditation report, Dr. Lisser.
I'm going to defer my report to the number 9 action item.
Okay. All right. Then we are at item E, our superintendent president.
Well, and I'll join along tonight by keeping the reports really brief, because I know we have a lot to work on tonight's agenda. But we did get a nice surprise sent over to us just a week ago, and I thought I would wait until tonight to share it. We have a beautiful little diamond award from the Community College League of California, which you all know as board members, you're registered with them. Our membership with them maintains our status as a league member, and they provide a variety of support and advisory services for us. But they also keep track of all of you, and they like to, as an organization, pay recognition to board members for outstanding accomplishments. And so they sent us this with a nice little card and asked if we would appropriately bestow this upon our board member. And they wanted to offer this special diamond recognition to Mr. John Zumwalt for fulfilling the Board of Trustee role for over 20 years.
Wow.
And so they've given us their Hey, there's something to be said for 20 years of anything, right?
Thank you. Well, that meant you survived about 4 elections. Five. Actually 6. Well, I guess that made 5.
Thank you, John, for your service. Well deserved. Yeah, 20 years of wisdom, not for just
Well, when I
bringing it
first
to
was
disagree.
first elected to the board, there were board members that have been members 32 years. One of Earl's predecessors. One has been for 22 years, Louis Sweet. Bob Lyman has been on the board 17 or 18 years. Let's see, the guy that I replaced, Lee Lockhart, 16. So this is not many compared to when I first got here.
So are you going for the 32?
No. I'd be happy if I was still alive. Very
Well,
really good.
Thank you, John. Okay, is that where you done?
I am.
That was your only item? Wow, okay. Academic Senate report, Dr. Trimble. No report. No report. Our Costa President's report? CSEA.
Just very short, after seeing this incredible tentative budget I just looked over, I can't wait for negotiations this Friday. It's wonderful.
We're all smiling.
I won't say. I have a great comment, but I'm not going to say it.
Only because
I'm
the
not
camera's
leaving my
rolling.
wingman. That's right.
Mr. Nichol, do we have a CASAPA report? Okay, well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
No comment for Steve Lamar? The consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion. An item may be removed from the consent calendar at the request of any member of the Board of Trustees or any person in the audience and considered as a separate agenda item. Do you have any items that need to be removed? I just have one correction on the minutes of the previous meeting. Megan, you fixed it?
I'm gonna fix it.
Okay, I didn't open the meeting. I opened it, it appears that I opened it and just left it to Ken. Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar items?
So moved.
Moved by trustee Sherman, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by trustee Nunes. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, moving on to our action item agenda. First, item number 7, our curriculum new, modified, and deleted. Dr. Lucerna.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have before you the curriculum report. And on the first item, you have the COS general education recommendation for, there's the general education framework, the COS general education and general education policy, the CSU and COS general education policy, the COS general education policy. And then, as you recall, this was an item that came to the board last month and was tabled. And we have had time to discuss this and review the information that we needed. And you also have in here a response from Dr. Trimble and the Academic Senate as to some of the questions that we had raised. And that she has given a couple of pages explaining that. And then the recommendation that I wrote back to Dr. Trimble and presented to the Academic Senate, that based on the further discussions and the supporting information, I'm recommending the Board of Trustees support the revised general education framework and the 2 general education policies, and recommend that the GE pattern take effect in 2016-17. And explains a little bit about what our concerns were, and then basically commends the GE Committee and Academic Senate for their time and commitment to the process. So that is back on our report for approval tonight with that further information. Okay, and then the rest of the report, if you look at page 1, we have modifications to courses. There is a whole slew of them that we're trying to get through the last Academic Senate meeting. So you can see that goes through page, for the one last meeting for the year. Those modifications go through page 8, and they're mostly for 5-year review, and a few changes to some units and alignment with the course identification numbers. On page 8, we have deletion of courses, and we have a series of arrow courses that were never offered or are no longer being offered, and then a few other ag and architecture courses. And then on page 9, we have new courses. And then we have, at the bottom of page 9, the deletion of a skill certificate as it is one that has not been offered or is not being offered. And then a modification of an AA3 not for transfer, that is a 5-year review. So it was my recommendation that the board accept the curriculum report and approve the courses, programs, and the policies.
Okay, do you have any questions from board members of Dr. Lozano? I'm happy to see that the issue is resolved and COS 2.0 works. I appreciate that on your behalf too, Dr. Trimble and Jennifer. Thank you very much. Any questions? Do I have a motion to approve curriculum?
Move we approve.
A second? It's been moved by Mr. Van, seconded by Mr. Zumwalt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, institutional effectiveness partnership with Initiative Success Indicators. Mr. Harrison.
Okay, I have a couple quick slides for you to look at to explain this to you this evening, just to refresh your memory. And I'm trying to do this in a way that it would help you connect to the things that we already know and that have been before you. But the Institutional Effectiveness Partnership Initiative is an initiative out of the State Chancellor's Office. It was triggered this last year in the 2014-15 Budget Act, and has taken on the form of a Chancellor's Office initiative. And a little bit of quick history. As I said, it came out of the Budget Act. It was one of the things that was required of the Chancellor's Office to be able to enact or engage with the legislature to monitor the newly awarded equity funding, that student equity funding that we were getting and are getting now, came out of that State Budget Act. I think the budget approval was there for that money to come to community colleges, but they wanted the Chancellor's Office to have a way of monitoring the effectiveness of that funding and whether or not it was actually being used for those targeted purposes. So the Chancellor's Office has become kind of our compliance monitor for that, and they have the oversight responsibility for that funding. And they call it the Institutional Effectiveness Partnership Initiative. And it's really just providing a statewide system of support, both for the effective implementation of this funding. And there was also a second little column in this initiative, and it had to do with all of the angst that was generated in the last 2 years statewide over accreditation, and specifically City College of San Francisco and the show cause response process they went through, the lawsuits that were filed, the legal processes that kicked into place. It all raised the questions about whether or not the Chancellor's Office as this centerpiece for administrative oversight for the community college system had any way of interacting or engaging with colleges before they got into trouble, or to know that they were getting into trouble. And so that's how this initiative came about. So you can see a little bit of text here, and I'm not going to read it all for you word for word, but it does point out that the two bills, Senate Bill 852 and 860, require that the initiative both monitor the effectiveness of this funding that's coming and have a system in place for providing support and assistance to colleges who want to prepare for their proper accreditation. So we were all required then in this list of initiatives to start to develop and adopt what they call the success indicators. So I give you the little roadmap here to try to give you a visual of how this all connects to what we're already doing. You all know about the Student Success Scorecard. That's been out a couple of years now. You know that we've got the ACCJC, our accrediting body, and they have a requirement for us to adopt what are called institution set standards. And now we have this effectiveness initiative coming out of the Chancellor's office, which is identified about 18 or 19 success indicators. So they have a responsibility now to make sure they go down this list of success indicators. What we want you to know is when you get to those last two stops on the road up there, or at least the two stops before you keep going on the road, is that we've embedded or built in our institution's focus for complying with all of those stop points into our master plan and into our strategic plan. So we wanted to make sure, we've shared this with faculty when we've talked to them, that this is not another new, different process. It's not another added layer, if you will. It is the Chancellor's Office version of monitoring our success by calling out these success indicators. And if you're doing a good job on the success indicators and your institution set standards, in theory, you're aligning with the things you need to do to be successful on that scorecard. So in our COS master plan, which is our 10-year master plan, and now in our strategic plan, we have very broad goals and then very specific, measurable strategic plan actions or objectives that, when accomplished, fulfill those first three signs for us. And then, of course, in the blue there at the top, the things that are really underpinning our strategic plan are, when you see the SSSP, that's the Student Support Services Plan, the SEP, which is the Student Equity Plan, that's the funding that the Chancellor's Office is monitoring. Those things are embedded into our district objectives. So we want to keep our focus as a faculty, as a staff, our board, we want our eye to be on the prize. And for us, the prize is focusing on our district objectives, and if we can achieve our objectives, we're going to move the needle on all of these other success indicators that we have to measure. So if you were going to tie this into our system, this is a little different spin than what you've seen in the past. But if you take our district's mission and the work that we do to build a master plan and then a strategic plan, what we want all of you to know is that our master plan and our strategic plan are specifically designed to make sure that as an institution, we hit the success indicators for the effectiveness partnership, which allows us then to remain compliant with the ACCJC, but also achieve institution set standards that we have to set forth for the commission. And by doing those things, we're continually moving the whole organization toward those student success scorecard metrics. So we've worked hard to get it all integrated and keep it simple for you as a board to monitor and help us guide and steer. We did have to log on to a portal now that's on the Chancellor's Office website. I had to officially, under death of penalty of perjury, swear that we were doing and working toward these things. And so the first four indicators from the partnership initiative out of the Chancellor's Office that we needed to log on and be accountable for this year at College of the Sequoias are these four success indicators. One is your course completion rate. And we went through a fairly sophisticated process with our research office. Dr. Ozturk did a really good job of looking at our last 10 years of completion rates. And then he did a subset of that, and he looked at our last 5 years of completion rates. And even though we show a stronger increase in our completion rates over the last 5 years, We weren't sure what all of the causes were for that. And so we didn't want to commit the institution to a target or an indicator that we didn't have the capacity to fulfill. So we took the 10-year rate and we took an achievable average across those 10 years, and it's a 68% completion rate for all of our courses for students earning a grade of a C or better. So we logged in and we said that our district is going to post as our success indicator in this area a 68% completion rate. We have a strong level of confidence that we will continue to meet or exceed that and can adjust it going forward. Then the other ones were a little bit more perfunctory. One is you had to log in as an institution and say, what's your status, what's your goal for accreditation? Well, we want to be fully accredited. So for us, we actually had to submit what our most recent status is. And under the ACCJC, our most recent status was to enter in that we have recently been reaffirmed. But reaffirmed is our current status. Full accreditation with no sanctions is our success indicator. Fund balance, again, it's another way of the Chancellor's Office keeping an eye a little bit on the fiscal solvency of districts. They want to know what your fund balance is, and we had to show a trend data. They have all of our financial reports, and they've seen that we have maintained a fund balance, even though we had really difficult years. We were able to, at least in the fund balance category, not fall below their minimum recommended 5%. Then we also called out the fact that we have a board policy that requires a minimum of a 10% fund balance, and now we have an annual board objective that was adopted for 15-16 to try to achieve a 10% fund balance. So we submitted 10% into the portal for our success indicator in our desired fund balance. And then overall audit, this is maintaining your status with your external auditor. And this language comes right off of an audit. We want to have an unmodified opinion, which is the best audit you can receive with no identified deficiencies or problems with internal controls. So we were able to log in, submit these four for this year, and meet the requirement we needed for our success indicators. These went through our participatory governance process. They went for readings and for approval at both District Governance Senate and Academic Senate. And so we wanted to have them here for you tonight so that you could, number one, be aware of the institutional partnership, the Institutional Effectiveness Partnership Initiative, and that we as a college were required to submit these four indicators. And then what I tried to do with the little presentation is just show you how it all fits so that you don't feel like we're having to walk out on another new, different kind of plan.
Great, you have a question?
Are these, is every district posting the same four
Yes.
standards for this year?
Yes.
And then on an ongoing basis, will there be new ones?
We think,
Or are these updated, or how does that?
yes, Ken, we think that they will continue to add to the list next year, open the portal for more success indicators to be completed. But we're not sure that the original, I think 17 or 18 that they come up with initially are going to all stick. Because this was responded to fairly quickly from the Chancellor's Office. I don't want to discredit any of the work that they did, but it's going now through a more substantive thought process. And even from the Chancellor's Office, we're hearing from folks that we don't know if all 18 of these make the best sense. So we may be adjusting what they are. We may be reducing the number of them. And so we'll see a few more added on, and we'll have the opportunity each year to continue to update and resubmit these.
And are you able to look at the other districts' postings as well?
Yes. Yes, if you log on to the Chancellor's Office website and you go to the Institutional Effectiveness Partnership Initiative, you'll see a click on right there where you can go down and pick by county the college and open up the individual colleges and see their pages reflected publicly.
I like how you put it. That's nice to see.
Yeah, just
And
to
a little
show,
road.
just to show how it works with what we're already doing.
Okay, any further questions?
I think the first one they're probably going to open up for next year for us to enter data and information into is effectiveness of board members with coffee at meetings.
Hey, John, can we give that?
You
plaque
give the
back?
guy-
We'll do a
Give
4
the
out of
plaque
5.
back.
You give the guy a diamond, you give him a diamond for over 20 years, and that's what you get.
That's too much caffeine.
Mine's almost done, I'm gonna hurry.
I'll be right back.
So we do need the board to take action.
We do.
Adopt
For
these
you to
four
come back.
indicators. Yes.
I move that we adopt the IEPI success indicators as described.
I'll second.
Been moved by trustee Nunes, seconded by trustee Sherman. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. John, can we move on to item number 9? Can you multitask?
Obviously not.
Okay, item number 9 is our COS strategic plan. Dr. Lisser.
And this was perfect order because Superintendent Carrizosa set me up so well for the strategic plan. So as you all know, we have been working with. We have been working the past year to put the strategic plan together that was based off our master plan. And we have the Institutional Planning and Effectiveness Committee took the lead on this, and that is co-chaired by myself and Greg Turner, the Vice President of Academic Senate. And so I'm just gonna, you guys have seen the goals, you've seen the objectives, we shared those with you at the board meeting in January at the retreat, and I know you've seen them several times since then, so I'm just gonna go through the report sections and then answer any questions. So basically, the first part is our vision, mission, letter from the superintendent, and then there's just a list of the people that, on page 5, that participated in the different processes, and then the number of folks who attended our Academic Senate Summit. We have an introduction followed by a 1-page, this is kind of the little summary that if you need to know what are our goals and our objectives, on page 8 we have that. So you can see that we have the 4 goals and 1 to 3 or 4 objectives under each of them. Starting on page 9 then is the breakdown with the district goal, our objective number 1 to increase all enrollment by 1.75% annually, the rationale, how we're going to assess it, and then what actions we're going to take. So in this first one, for example, develop and implement a marketing plan to increase enrollment, develop and implement a plan to increase outreach, and then assessing all of those plans. So again, I don't want to go through this page by page because I know you guys have already seen the objectives and the actions several times, but that's each goal has its objectives and actions through page 20, and then at the end we just have examples of the workshops and the materials and the different PowerPoints and things that we used at the various events. And so if you guys want me to get more specific, I can.
No, Jennifer, I have a question. I know we
Okay.
talked about this at retreat, so I'm not at all questioning the strategic plan before I say anything.
Okay,
Make
you're
out
on
there.
page 8.
I'm on page 8.
Okay.
I'm not, like district, on the district objective 1, there's a number there. Like on 2, there's no number, so if one student, if you increase the number by 1, is that acceptable, or how do you measure that one if there's not a number on the rest? The rest seem hard to measure in terms of, or is that the goal, to see if you can actually reach that, or if you make it just a little better, is that good enough? Does that make sense?
We could have gone either way with that, and we had a lot of discussions about it.
I'm sure you did, because we did at board retreat, and then I noticed the first one has a number, but then the rest are kind of just increase, which to me, as an objective, is very, very hard to measure if you just say, because your opinion of increase may be different than others, right?
True, yeah,
But I guess if the committee all agreed to that, is what I'm saying, maybe the number's not so important.
again, there was a lot of discussion about that, about whether there needed to be an actual percentage or number, and we, with a lot of discussions with Dolly, Dr. Osterk in the research office, really needed to set kind of what our baselines are. So when you go into, for example, on page 10, it talks more about how we're going to measure that. So the district goal is, we'll improve the rate at which our students complete degree certificates and transfer objectives. And so we want to increase this number of students who are transfer prepared annually. And then if you look at the assessment, there's a lot of different things we look at. So like the number of students transferring, the number of students who achieve transfer prepared status, and then the transfer rate, which is our transfer velocity cohort. And so there's a lot that we need to do to establish what that baseline of those three measures are, and then how we're going to increase it. The other, yeah, so I don't know if that helps answer it, but
So are you saying though, okay, I guess basically my question is this the way it will be done? Or by collecting these numbers now, this will look a little different in the future? Or is this gonna be the way you see it being done, with just being able to increase instead of putting numbers on it? Is the goal to have numbers, or is this kind of the
I
acceptable
think-
way? So I don't keep asking you.
well, that's okay. I think it could go either way, honestly.
Okay.
And where you're gonna see the numbers that are now in the annual report. Because remember now we do.
You been upset.
Real nervous now.
Oh, you know, see what he did, Lori? He brought another cup of coffee.
You try to push it away.
Good move.
So where we'll see the numbers is now in the annual report. So we will do an annual report on the strategic plan, and in there we'll have, it'll be more detailed, the numbers and the percentages of where we will see it on an annual basis.
Okay.
And that's where, and we could have easily done something like increase the number of students who are transfer prepared annually by 2%. And after lots of discussions and lots of input from everybody, we decided to leave it off at this point. So,
Okay, Mr. Zumwalt.
I'm good with this,
thank you.
but next year. To me, when everything says the same thing, when everything says exceed, what that says to me is equal or exceed. Well, somewhere in there, one of these tasks, you know you're gonna have to really work hard just to equal it. And there's other things in there, you know you're gonna increase 10%. As this gets more refined and go forward, I just think the report would be, have more teeth in it. In some cases, you actually put it over there.
I would suspect that by the next time you do this, you know, because this is a 3-year plan, that by the time you do the 19 years, maybe this would change and you would have all the type of things you said you're looking for now, that they would be consideration given that percentages or numbers or whatever.
Well, and I know in our workshop with the ACCJC, I think that was kind of the thing they stressed the most is, and you know, these objectives obviously will probably change, and I think as board members, what we want to know is if these are, you know, integral and important in order for us to meet accreditation and make sure our students are being successful, then what are the numbers of board members that we should see in order to say, we did that, great, now we have another one, but we haven't missed this one, is my concern. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I'm afraid we make a new goal and, oh gee, but we needed to do this one, and I don't know if we actually did it because it just said increase. Was that good enough?
And I think a couple of things to point out is one, as Stan just presented, all of this data is also our scorecard data. And it's our institutional set standards for the ACCJC, and we have set goals for those numbers to increase. So when we look at the data, that's really what we're going to be using a lot of that. And then also within the master plan, each area set a goal for growth and for success. And so when you go into the master plan, every single program set a growth target and a success target for the next 10 years. So we'll be able to use those numbers as well to see individually how we do those hit. But we will take all this under consideration and look at putting percentages in for the next version.
And so the board now will get an update on these objectives in the annual report, which will have though data.
Yes, and so in July, you will get, that's our timeline, July, you're going to get the annual report on the last year's strategic plan. So that's gonna be the last
14-15,
old
right?
one, that's gonna be the one from the 13-15. We'll get that, and that's gonna look different than what you're gonna see for this one, because now that we have more targeted objectives, more targeted actions, we're gonna be able to see better data reporting numbers
Yes.
in the annual report. And so, yes, the first one would come then next July. on this one.
See, and I think if you look,
I did, I see the numbers there, and I guess it's just harder to point, yeah, it seems to me if they were in the actual objective,
right,
in general, it would be easier for us as board members, but I see where there is backup information there.
and what we're doing, I guess, every one of these objectives, if you look at how it's gonna be assessed,
There is enough.
it's showing you that we're gonna compare, this is a 3-year strategic plan, but we're gonna measure these actions that we're implementing annually, every year. So that's, I think, where a little bit of our ambiguity came in, is we didn't feel like we had enough of an understanding to have a number reflected over 3 years. So if we're gonna review and compare the following to the most current prior year data, here's what you're gonna see. The number of students transferring to UC systems, CSU, in-state, out-of-state 4-year institutions. You're gonna see the number that transferred in 14-15, which is the year prior, and what we had accomplished in 15-16 when we targeted. And then I think we'll have a better idea when we look at that 3 times, Lori, to know in the next 3-year objective, what a percentage of increase should or could be that we could be striving for. Right now, where I think we struggled is we weren't even sure we could identify the baseline data.
Yes, okay.
And that was with a lot of guidance from Dr. Buster
Yeah,
from
I
the
mean-
research office. He was really, after showing us, here's our data sets, here's our, and he really encouraged us in all of the arenas to take the percentage off until we're able to.
That
get
may
it.
say so long, and that's why I start off by saying, I'm good with what you've done. I still think that long-term, some of these can identify.
Yes, yes.
And the first one, the reason it does have the percentage is because that percentage is set in our master plan. So we
Right,
set that goal.
right. And it's a big whole number on the enrollment. It's a big demographic whole number. That's pretty easy to get baseline.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of these, not as easy.
I know, and I guess as a board member, I just want to make sure I'm not going too deeper than I should as a board member in terms of asking for data, because it seems like that's the information we want.
Mhm.
So I guess as long, like to see these
Mhm.
things that are outlined is gonna be, I think, we really need to, as board members, pay attention to
Yeah.
that when it comes.
And we all felt better, even in our discussions, when we started concentrating on what it was we agreed we were gonna get together and assess on a year-by-year basis.
Yeah. 'Cause otherwise
Then
it's
we
too
were,
late.
then we were comfortable with this world peace language up here. Because we know right down in here, these are the things specifically from one year to the next
That you will track.
we're gonna look at.
Okay, and as board members, though, we'll get to see those things.
Yes.
Okay.
And you'll get those every year in the annual report starting next July, so
Right.
July of 16.
Got it. Okay, my question's been answered. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to approve our 2015 through 18 strategic plan? Moved by Mr. Jewell, do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Sherman. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Thank you, Dr. Lucerna. Item number 10, our board policies revised. First read, Mr. Carrizosa.
These are our first reading on 3 of these policies that are kind of making their way through now the end of the systems process for the academic year just completed. And these are all in the 4,000s category, which academic services was the target area this year that we chose to try to really work through and do either revisions of or updates to. So a couple of things to remind you that these are 10+1 area board policies. So these are recommendations coming to you as a result of having been reviewed and also achieving final approval from your academic senate. So in the way that our policy is put together, if it's a 10+1 policy, they do present them to me as superintendent president, but only because I'm the steward of the board meeting agenda. And it's my job to work with Megan and to get these properly posted and the data here available for you. But they really have the opportunity to get the final approval on these. What I want to call your attention to again is just looking at the second page of that first revision, BP 4020, where you can see those steps in the VP AP approval process. That's our little chronology map right there. So you know that on September 1st, these were initiated through the Office of Academic Services. I'm sorry, in step 1, they were initiated through the Office of Academic Services. In step 2, which was back in February, they came through senior management. In step 3, February, they went out for their first 30-day review, which means they went to all of our committees and our district governance senate. Then they came back to senior management. Then they went on to academic senate, and you can see over 2 different meetings over that about a 3-week period or a 4-week period, Academic Senate reviewed and gave final approval for these, and they're coming before you now. So they're pretty self-explanatory. You can see a strike through for the items that are being recommended for delete, and a bold and an underline that things are being recommended for addition. On BP 4020, I did want to call your attention about 2/3 of the way down, the third to the bottom paragraph. Yeah, it has a little notation there that this paragraph needs clarification. That was actually a note that Academic Senate had in there that we just didn't remove from the draft, but we'll clean that up.
So it has been clarified.
Yes, it has, John, but we didn't get the note taken off of there, and that's our correction. But in terms of Academic Senate, they saw them, you can see in step 5, Senate saw them on March 25th. They saw them again a month later on April 22nd, and now they're before you as board. And they took final approval on April 22nd. So the first one is in curriculum and course development. The second one is criteria for associate's degree in general education, which go along a little bit with the policy you saw reviewed earlier this evening, the GE policy that came forward on the graduation requirements. And this is again where that more requirements in particular areas and breadth of education requirements was discussed and factored into our actual 10+1 board policy. And then the last one is a pretty simple companion policy, really the unit credit hour configuration. And that's a requirement under the education code for the college, the administration in particular, to have a proper formula that's compliant for awarding unit and credit hours for our courses. So these are here tonight for a first reading. They'll be back at the next board meeting for a second and final reading, assuming that you have no questions, or if there are any, we'll try to answer those. And then we would recommend that you approve these as a first read and move them on to a second reading.
Back motion.
I'll make a motion that subject to deletion of content in 4020, that we waive first reading, pass all three on the second reading.
Do you have a second? Been moved by Mr. Zumwalt, seconded by Mr. Nunes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, thank you. We will move on to item 11. Approval of appointments of educational classified administrators. Mr. Brown.
At the College of Sequoias, we employ our managers by one of two ways. We either have an employment agreement, or we have it where the board actually takes action to formally appoint managers for 1 year. Later on in the agenda, I'm going to discuss the fact that we have our vice president on an employment agreement, but the rest of our managers are employed through the Education Code, Section 72-411, which is an annual appointment of managers. And at this time, I am bringing before the board this agenda item, which does formally appoint all of our managers, excluding vice presidents and the president. And at this time, I'd ask that the board adopt resolution 2015-08, formally appointing our managers from July 1st, 2015 through June 30th of 2016.
I move that we adopt resolution 2015-08.
Second. Earl, second.
Been moved by trustee Nunes, seconded by trustee Mann. Megan, will you please poll for it?
Trustee Nunes?
Aye.
Trustee Mann?
Aye.
Trustee Sherman?
Aye.
Trustee Zumwalt?
Aye.
Trustee Brennan?
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right, we will move on to item number 12. Mr. Batch, you're on for a few here. We'll just leave you up here.
Yes. Item number 12 is an employment agreement between the temporary part-time director of the TRIO Student Services Support Grant. Our grant funding is ending at the end of August of 2015 for this TRIO Student Services Support Grant. So what I'm asking you is that you formally approve this temporary employment agreement, which would have our current director in that position be appointed for 2 months on a temporary contract. Now, right now, that's Ricardo Marmoleo. Right now, Ricardo Marmoleo is funded by 2 sources. One being the Upward Bound Math and Science Grant. That goes through 2017. But as I mentioned, he's also funded by the Student Support Services Grant, and that does end in August of 2015. So what we have here is a short-term temporary contract for Mr. Marmolejo. And at this time, I would ask that the board formally approve of this temporary contract.
So I'm assuming he's the only one then with this type of agreement, because we just approved all of these, right?
Yes.
So he'd be the only one that has something different than every other classified administrator, correct?
Yes, and I forgot to mention on item number 11 that it expressly states that Ricardo Marmolejo is appointed for the year at 50%.
And the
All-
PUC is, what's happening is that the funding is being reduced. So he'll have a 50% assignment for us for an entire year, but he'll have the second 50%, which is allowing him to continue to be full-time, just for a couple months longer till that funding runs out.
Got it, okay. Okay. Any further questions, or can I get a motion?
I move we approve.
Second?
Second.
Moved by trustee Sherman, seconded by trustee Nunes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Moving on to item number 13, correct? Yeah.
Item number 13 is going to be identical for the most part to items 14 and 15. And that's approval of employment agreement between our vice presidents and the district. All of our vice presidents, Mr. Calvin with the student services, Ms. Staton with administrative services, and Ms. Vega Lacerna with academic services. Their current employment agreement expires on June 30th of 2015. Before you tonight are another employment agreement for another 2 years, which will start July 1st, 2015 and expire on June 30th of 2017. I put these in 3 different agenda items so they can be voted on separately. And the first one would be Ms. Vega Lacerna, or Dr. Vega Lacerna, the Vice President of Academic Services. The terms of that employment agreement are included within the board action item. At this time, I would ask that the board formally approve the employment agreement.
So you're recommending we approve her?
Yes.
Did you anticipate we might not have approved one? Is that why you separated them?
No comment.
Yeah, no comment.
Uh-oh.
I'm thinking it's one item, I'm kidding.
No,
Lori,
Were they nervous? I don't know.
I appreciate the levity, but and I know you know this, but for technical purposes as well, structurally, you always want to look at these multi-year contracts individually. In a year like this year, they could have been grouped together and acted upon by themselves. If for some reason you had a different strategy the next year and they were laid out individually, people would worry. So you have to pick the right way to do it and do it the same every time.
I agree.
But it does allow you to pick them off one at a time.
I make a motion that we approve item 13. A second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Item number 14.
Item number 14, again, is I would ask that
I make a motion to approve item number 14. I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Item number 15, do I have a motion?
I move we approve item 15.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Okay. Did you get that, Megan?
I'm getting it.
St. John's, he's drinking that second cup of coffee. It's starting to kick in now.
Okay, well, thank you, and,
Lori, John, can I talk to you after the meeting for a second?
yes.
okay. Item number 16, the tentative budget. Ms. Stanton, you are up.
Okay,
Big item of the night.
this is the big item. I apologize in advance, but we'll try and get through it kind of quickly. I'm glad that you approved the item right before it. Through all of this.
We could have really made the meeting short.
Yeah, if we reverse the order, I'm not sure what would happen. Yeah, so tonight we are bringing the tentative budget to you for your approval. And before I start, I want to thank Leangela Miller Hernandez, who does a lot of work and puts a lot into this, as well as Karen Pulse and Linda McCauley, who are not here. They really do a Herculean job in putting this together. So our tentative budget overarching theme is it is a good year for the state. It's a good year for community colleges and K-14 education altogether. Now we'll see. So it's, oh, that will help, turning it on. There you go. I will try and skim over a number of these things, but this is the budget process that you're familiar with. We find ourselves right now working with a May revise. We're waiting for the legislature to approve a budget by June 15th. And then we'll do all our work over again, implement any necessary changes, and bring a final budget to you in September. These are the tentative budget assumptions that are in the large budget document that you have in front of you, and we have extra copies if anyone else wants one, but this is our tentative budget book. And it includes growth, also known as access funding. The state at May revise landed on 3%. We budgeted 100 FTEs, which would equate to approximately 1.1%, because we don't really want to budget growth we don't have until we know if it's coming. So the 100, or the 1.1%, was simply because we moved our third session this summer. We have to count that in 15, 16. So that's growth we know is real. That will be approximately 400,000, actually a little less. 1.02% COLA, you might recall it was 1.58, or it was higher at May revise. They lowered that. But that's 474,000. It's built on per FTS funding and the center funding we receive for college or a center base funding. It doesn't really come as one lump sum, but that equates to about 474,000. 3.1% health and welfare cap increase is in here. It is in there for Costa, budgeted at almost 77,000. Also want to mention, we went ahead and budgeted. This is not a guarantee, but because we had the funds, we wanted it as a placeholder. A similar 3.1% or 50% for management and CSEA. Again, it's just a placeholder to have it in the budget, pending negotiations and final agreements there. So the actual increase we found out on May 20th was 6.2%, and previously, when you've seen these slides, we've been planning and are projecting an estimate of 7%. So PPO4 RXA is what we base our increase on. I'm going to ask you to either by pen or mentally add another bullet down there. I can't believe I left it off, but the big dollar item this year, and I think I left it off because I work off a template that I presented a couple times before, and this is so new and so unusual. But we have $2.08 million coming in ongoing funding. The state is calling it an increased base allocation. It was sent primarily for the purpose of assisting colleges and districts with their increased bond obligations and for the increased PERS and STRS obligations for this coming year, and ongoing. Not that those equal $2 million, but that was the large chunk that the state chose. They didn't put it in access, they didn't put it in COLA or anything else. This format they've never funded any community college in this format before, and they say they will not again, but it is an ongoing stream, and they just called it increased base allocation. I think it was to make up for all those years of cuts that we've received and really help us kind of get on our feet again. So it is on page 5 in your budget book, and that's the prior time that we presented for May, before May revise, that was estimated at $975,000. I'll point this out to you folks if you're opening it. So on page 5, we have in this lower right-hand corner, we have all of our revenues. And we talk about our main campus, foundation base, center campus, increased base allocation. You can see prior year didn't have it. January governor's budget only estimated $975,000. That jumped up to $2 million this time, which is ultimately why you'll see in our budget, we're adopting a budget of a surplus of about $971,000. So moving on from there, there's lots of other assumptions. We have student success, student equity. The state continues to fund these very generously. On top of what they sent us last year in ongoing funds, they're giving us an additional $750,000 for student success and $850,000 for student equity. Our student services department is working feverishly to put this to use wisely and methodically, and not just spend it. but that's funding that we have received in a categorical nature. We also received scheduled maintenance and instructional equipment. Those come as a lump sum, and we usually split them 50-50, so that's $577,000 for each. We choose to budget $276,000 of that $577,000 for instructional equipment for our computer refresh each year, so there is some additional dollars that are available there. Those are all categorical. Additionally, in this budget, we have increased our STRS by $370,000 for the unrestricted ASIA general fund. It shows the percentages there for the employer paid. And for our PERS, we've increased it by $98,000, and it shows some percentage increases there. The next two bullets are possible additional funding. These were not in the January budget, they were in the May budget. And they have not been budgeted, they're not in this budget book, and that's not what you're approving tonight, but I want you to know about them. $585,000 is our estimate of funding the governor has proposed for quote-unquote increased full-time faculty hiring. The reason we haven't budgeted it is they have not determined a methodology for allocation, and we don't know what we will be receiving yet. Basically, they want colleges that have a lower or not as strong of a full-time to part-time ratio to increase their full-time. They shoot for a 75-25. We're actually fairly close to that one. We're one of the better colleges. So we don't know if they're going to take that money then and give it to the colleges that need to increase and likewise increase their fund, or if they'll give it to them to increase, but give it to us and say it's unrestricted. You don't have to hire. We don't know how it's coming yet, hence it's not budgeted. And then here is a big bucket. The state has had such a good year that they are sending a lot of money our way. This is going to be well over $4 million in one-time mandate cost reimbursements. Leangela and I have both said regularly, I think since the January budget, that we will believe it when we see it because it's such a generous amount. And whenever the state catches themselves or has to recalculate or runs into trouble, mandate cost reimbursements is the first thing that they cut. So we have never budgeted these until we receive them, so they're not in here, but we'll talk about it in a later slide. That is a big pot of money, again, just one time. The state is not committing that to anything ongoing. So the budget that you have before you has unrestricted revenues of almost $52 million, expenditures of almost $51 million, and a surplus of $971,000 currently. When you combine it with our restricted side, it's a $64 million revenue, 63 almost expenditures. We always balance our categoricals for complete expenditures of the revenues received. So in case anyone on the coffee shop asks you how big is your budget, you can say, combined for our general fund at 63, almost 64 million. And then regarding fund balance, Dan mentioned something about that earlier, but our beginning fund balance we're projecting is $5.3 million. Including the surplus that you see budgeted, our ending would be $6.3 million. Want you to know that our beginning will probably be higher than that. As we've mentioned, I brought some projected expenditures to you recently. We'll probably have well over $1 million fall. My latest calculation today could be $1.6 million. But so that will be higher. 6% reserve for economic uncertainties actually agrees to our current board policy, but we'll be above that. So we're going to be closer or beyond our board priority. You have set an annual priority, and the most recent is 10%. So this would get us to about 12.4%, which I think is very healthy for our district. We have left these numbers below just for you to compare. If we only had 6%, as our board policy dictates, we would only have 3 weeks of general fund expenditures. If we were to be equal to the state average, we would have 17%. So we're not quite there, but the state average last I met up there in Sacramento is 17%. So we are marching forward. I think it's good. Yeah. I am going to go through a number of slides, but hopefully quickly. I want you as a board to know we are really tasked with linking our resource allocations to our district goals, our district objectives, our mission. It's part of our ACCJC institutional set, not the institutional set standards, but our accreditation standards that we have to meet. it's something that we will be graded upon when accreditation teams come to visit. So we are always looking at what are we going to spend our money on, and how does it tie to what we do specifically regarding our goals and objectives. So I've done that on the next few slides. Here's just an example. Our new faculty, we have full-time faculty, 9. We have 2 new full-time counselors. We have 1 full-time faculty that was categorical that ran out, moved to the general fund. And this budget includes 4 full-time temporary faculty. So you can see the goals: increasing student enrollment, improving the rate at which students complete degrees, certificates, and transfers, specifically targeting English, math, ESL for tech ed, strategically tailor and implement programs and student services that match the unique needs of our student population, et cetera, reducing the achievement gap. So we feel really good about the additional faculty and certificated staff that we have hired. We also have 6 new student success coordinators that we're hiring through our student equity plan and program. We have some of these small ones I've included because we actually had base budget augmentations go through our whole system and cycle. And our president, Carrizosa, shared those with the district later this spring. But here's some of the smaller ones. We have after-hours library services, 7,000. We have additional funds for library books and periodicals, which is coming out of restricted lottery. Here are the first 3 bullets here I wanted to share. These are some of the items that were kind of pending. They were not in the January governor's budget. And when I did the budget forums, those were not included. These are additional because we did have additional revenues come. Above base resource allocation, we always allocate above base resource. We never really have a budget for it. So every year we look and say, can we afford to take this money from fund balance? Because this year we do have these extra revenues and it's a little bit of a better year, we decided this is the year to take that and make that in our budget ongoing. We usually fund $200,000, but another $100,000 of that comes from a categorical. So this works out pretty well to actually put it in. We needed to increase our summer budget. We have just scraped and pulled those budgets together. And last summer we had a strong summer school with strong offerings on all 3 campuses. We want that to be our norm. So we have a summer this summer that's looking very similar. And we wanted to provide the budget for that new norm for our district. Our overload budget has been over budget for many years, and it was just time to rectify that. And then even a small item, such as increasing the instructional aid budget for large student lecture that went through our base budget request process. And all of those tie to those goals listed below. We have additional restricted funds for SSSP and SEP, as I mentioned before. Those match some of our, they specifically match goal 3, and that goal and those district objectives relate very closely to how those funds will be spent. One of the last ones, the instituted the Extended Police Academy. That cost to our district was $125,000. That was a strategic plan involving increasing student enrollment, increasing career technical education courses, and strategically tailoring and implementing the academic programs that match the unique needs of our population. This was a high demand area and will also help us to grow the Hanford Center. So these are some of the links. These next 2 slides show the classified positions, and I think there was one part-time management for the Extended Police Academy. And there's also the provost that have hit our budget, that are in our tentative budget. And a lot of those you'll see for the unrestricted happen to be 0.5 or partial positions, simply because I think we're still being quite conservative in how we add. But some of those are they are all listed there, but these went through a process as well that the president shared. And this is our categorical side of all of that. Multiple item positions that were added through categorical. And so again, we've tried to tie these, we've linked these to our goals and objectives. Goal 2, improve the rate at which students complete their degrees, certificates, and transfer, and engaging in best practices to sustain effective operational systems. Getting to know our new goals and objectives from our new strategic plan. So next I'm going to go over some fiscal solvency projections. This first slide just shows you what is built in, okay? And then we'll show you 2 slides that show the projections. Step and column for the next 2 years, if we were to go, we're looking at 15-16, but what does this mean for 16-17 and 17-18? So these are our step and column estimates. We have PERS and STRS estimates here. I actually got newer rates just about a day after preparing this, so you'll see these vary only by about a couple $1,000s, but that's very close. Utilities increase is just a placeholder. It's based on an estimated 3% escalator. Insurance, this year at this time we've included workers' comp. We have yet to get our property and liability rate, so no changes are in the current year. But for the out years, we put a 5% estimated increase. It's just a placeholder for these projections. We don't know what our FON, our faculty obligation number increase will be, but assuming it's lower and perhaps 2 faculty, what would that be if we added 200,000 each year? And then in one of these next slides, you'll see I also assumed some growth, and what would that equal in the revenue? So the revenue side of 472,000. So if you go to this first one, if we assumed 0 COLA and no growth in 16-17 and 17-18, you could see we would be a little bit upside down. 16-17 is not too bad. There's things you can maneuver to balance that budget, but you are further down for 17-18. Right now, we don't think that'll be the case because the state is still in a fairly good position. We know that ship will turn at some point. But we also know that we're looking at some steady growth in the next couple of years, probably not fast growth. But so I'm not too concerned about this at this point, but I wanted you to see what that would look like. Assuming fairly conservative estimates, I think, a 1% COLA, which happens to be similar to what we've received the last couple of years, and 100 FTES growth. If we were to be able to do that for 2 years, this is what it would look like. So if you put those dollars in, then you've righted the ship and you're positive for 16, 17, 17, 18, maybe even a little better off than balanced. So I think that was important for you folks to see and think through. Items to watch. Okay, having just said that for fiscal solvency and fiscal projections, these are items to watch for future years, and I specifically want to talk about the first bullet. But 16, 17, believe it or not, Prop 30 is supposed to sunset just a portion of it. It's the 0.25% sales tax at the end of December 16. That actually could be a chunk for us, 1.2 to 1.5 million, somewhere around the 1.3 range. Leandro and I were trying to estimate it, and we don't have a specific way to calculate that yet. But I want to share with you from the state's vantage point, and I was just at an ACPO session with a lot of workshops on this. They're not too concerned about this. It was a little surprising. I think what they were trying to say in so many words is that so much of our one-time money that we're receiving this year is actually expected to be ongoing at the state level, that they think they'll be able to chisel out something toward this. I don't know how much and I don't know what year, but they really didn't jump all over this. They jumped all over the increased PERS and STRS. They said, we cannot guarantee any funding to help you with this. This is what you need to be watching for. So also in 16-17, our PERS and STRS will go up by 566,000. 17-18, they'll go up by 608,000. And 18-19, 625. So that projection you just saw did include PERS and STRS increases, just slightly different amounts by a couple thousand. 18-19, the loss of the larger half of that Prop 30, that's the one they say we really do need to watch out for. It could be $5 million for us. Now again, the state may bring this tax back and they may pass it in November 2016. That's actually their plan at this time, but we will see, yeah. So,
So Christine, I'm just to make sure I'm clear, the PERS and STRS each year, that's the total cost or added on to what's already up top?
added on to what's on, yeah, completely new, ongoing expenditures.
So by in 3 years, over the course of that, that's over $1.5 million.
It is, and it will continue on that path until 2021. Yeah.
So that good news in this budget that
It's all taken away now.
that CSEA President Lamar was talking about earlier, is that there's enough ongoing revenue and some chunks of one-time money now that if budgeted carefully can help an institution cover the future costs in years when we may not get that funding at all. So I know that's not what he was referring to, but that's certainly good news, I think, for us as an institution, because we at least have some hope right now that future bills can be accounted for if we start considering prepaying or at least pre-earmarking the ongoing funding we have now for a bill we know that's coming up. Yeah. So.
And as we discussed that, this last line that's a little hard to read, every speaker I've heard, every training I've been to has said, you know, you might want to set aside ongoing funds for cover future PERS and STRS increases. You saw that $971,000 surplus. I'm not saying we need to commit it all, but by the time we come back with the final budget, we may be choosing to commit some of that just as a placeholder to be spent the next year. Yeah.
What happens in 2021? Will we caught up on that? Is that what they're saying?
They're saying we're 100% caught up, and I'm going to be honest, I think PERS is going to recalculate, and we probably won't have such high contribution increases for the next few years, but STRS is still really in trouble, and it's an expensive venture, and it's a paradigm shift from what's been in our past, really. Yeah. So yeah, it all has to do with actuarial and the unfunded liability and the fact that really, I don't know if it's accounting principles or if it's the state is saying they have to fund this. So they're sharing the pain between the state of California, a very small percentage, PERS and STRS themselves, and the various
Local
school
institutions.
districts. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it seems like we're getting a real clear message from the chancellor's office with this IEPI. They're getting that out there for a reason, because then once ACCJC comes in, they're gonna say, well, the chancellor's office, we were told by budget that you should be putting money away. It's gonna be their way of coming back to you to say, you didn't do what you were told.
I think
We have to, there's being a real, I think there's a message being sent, that's pretty
Yeah.
clear to every institution.
I think the chancellor's been pretty outspoken in his statements about districts paying attention to the fact that this is a good budget year, and that while there's a new one-time and some ongoing money coming to your budget this year, more than what you may need for everything you have this year, he's consistently said, please consider your future obligations to PERS and STRS, because I think what his sources are saying is those good budget years in 17, 18, 18, 19, cyclically, that's when we're going to be starting to roll up on the next recession. And so we need to think about taking care of those fiscal responsibilities as soon as possible.
That could be a real
All
guide.
right. Well, what I'm going to contribute is I'd like just to reinforce what I'm hearing here is that one of the things that made the college an unpleasant place the last several years, whether you're a student or if you're just trying to help students, is that our reserves were so puny that we used to have to whack the hell out of everything that the state solved. And those institutions that had large reserves were able to not cut back so much. And gosh, I'd like to be one of those institutions that didn't cut back so much.
We will be.
And I think the odds are pretty good that by 1918, that Prop 30 money might not be there.
Right.
Or this way, at best, not much of it.
Some adjustment
So,
will be made.
just because you're fat down and happy right now doesn't mean you stay that way for your forever. So I'm not telling you you already know. I wanted to reinforce for those that might listen that the administration's on the right track. And I agree with the rest of the board is too. I just tend to speak up first.
That second cup of coffee.
And I think the next slide is encouraging too, because that's gonna help us a lot.
This will. It's encouraging, but there's some issues. So 14-15, you'll see the state is funding us at 89.86 FTES. We'll only probably come in 89.19, or my count today was actually a little under 89.10. But that's not bad. A lot of it has to do with shifting that summer to next year, and we didn't choose to shift it. It just started July 1st. We actually did okay, but we didn't grow by what we hoped this year. Enrollments are really starting to come in now. And then budgeting that 100 that we know we're going to receive, we're actually, Jennifer, do you remember what we're at that third session summer? We're already
I think it was 175.
Oh, third session?
I believe so.
Wow,
It was
so
it was
I've
high.
only budgeted 100, we're already at 170.
I don't quote it, but
Last I saw it was 139, but that was quite a while
I think
ago.
it was right
Yeah,
there.
so, anyway, and then we'll just continue to grow, and you can see our history. Something we kind of appreciate from a budget standpoint, and I think academic services and student services as well, if we're not trying to chase this mid-sized college, and just realize that right now we're about 9,000, and we just want to have that methodical growth of close to 2% if we can, then it really makes budgeting easier, it makes planning our course offerings easier, planning our schedules and.
There's just
summers.
less trauma to
Well,
the
student
institution.
Success is better in general, because we're hoping
You're,
and focusing on what
you're not, and you're not booming and busting intentionally.
You can see our boom and bust on the actuals there. So that is our FTS. I think it's always interesting to keep here. In case you're interested, it's not all just general fund unrestricted. So we have our restricted side, and these are the larger categoricals that are on the restricted side. You know, the interesting ones might be student success. I told you how much more money. It's actually 750,000 plus another 160 some that came mid-year last year. So you can see that almost, you know, over 700,000 increase there. Student equity, the increase there. I don't think anything else has changed much. Everything else was very similar. The scheduled maintenance and instructional equipment, we split it 50-50 because we were not funding Live with that this year. So mandate reimbursement. Okay, let's talk about that large chunk of money. We will, I'm sure, come back to you and have further discussions with the board for direction for this, but I just wanted to put some ideas out there. 4.8 million is what we're estimating. Again, we'll believe it when we see it. We never have budgeted them until we receive them, and that's how it was at all the prior districts I worked at as well. When and if received, possible options, these are just items to mention. Our capital projects for facilities needs, our bond funds are expended, and we have no emergency pots of money. We have a little over $1 million that's in our capital projects. So we could transfer a portion over there. It's just an option. OPEB, our other post-employment benefits, we have that pressed. We have $6 million in there, and our unfunded liability is a little over $11 million. So it may be a good time to send some one-time funds over there. Holding a reserve for PERS and STRS. I realize PERS and STRS is ongoing, but we will want to set aside a large portion of this toward that. A couple other items I just mentioned. We still have one general fund COP for $3 million. It was our student center that is paid by 3 different pots. The majority, 60%, is paid by the district, and the other out of student senate, basically the student center trust and the health center. We are also going to have some work at the Hanford Quad. I don't know, I put that as the lowest priority, so maybe don't consider that. But as Byron Woods and I are working on that, we're not sure how these designs will translate into the dollars we have available for that. We can certainly keep it at the budget that we need to, but in case someone was interested and the board decided that was a priority, we could move funds there. So those are just some initial thoughts. Again, it's one-time dollars. Legislature, where are we now? They are saying that we may even receive more money, but I don't know. This has really been in flux. The last calculations are saying there could be an additional $80 million allocation to community colleges. We will find out really soon. They'll probably adopt it in a week. Funding for growth. This is interesting. I don't know if you want to follow this saga, but they came up with a whole new growth funding formula, also known as Access. And we were going to be funded fairly high, and then too many colleges, especially large urban colleges or some of the more successful colleges, complained. They restructured, they pushed it through legislation, and they have a new funding formula that actually is based on 3 indicators instead of 6. Educational attainment for 25-year-olds and above, unemployment for 60-year-olds and above, and households below the poverty line. And even though there's 3% at the state that they're going to adopt, they're going to still split that up slightly differently. Well, our calculation is an estimate of 5.72%. We won't get that unless we grow. So again, we've only budgeted a little over 1%. But if for some reason the kids show up at our doors knocking, we would welcome them and we would receive additional growth funding. We're waiting for clarification on the allocation methodology for that increased full-time faculty hiring. And then adult ed, it just is, they're saying it's very contentious at the state level, and they're still trying to settle that additional funding. I'll move through these quickly, but if you're interested, we do have all the farm budgets and the different units listed in here. A lot of this will be similar to what you've seen before. The one new thing is we took some restricted lottery funding and we wanted to put that toward our farm, and we're telling all the units to spend that first. It can only be used on instructional supplies. So if they spend those amounts first, you know, Ag Tech was just $1,000, but Equine unit, which has a lot in instructional supplies, was $15,500. If they spend those first, that may enable us to not require so much money from the farm, which is having a couple rough years with lack of water and things like that. So those are the only new things in the farm budgets. And we have our total farm expenses, total farm revenues. You can see the expense, we're deficit spending in this next year, which is part of why we're hoping to help just a little bit. And then we also have our other funds, everything from Farm Special Reserve, Linwood Reserve. This is just, it's not our fund balances, it's just what revenue and or expenditures have been budgeted. And we have all of our bonds in here. We have the actual bonds that we hold and then the debt obligation that we run through the county. And that was really long, and that's all of it. Any questions?
That was really long.
I know.
That kind of news.
That's very understandable, thank you very much.
I don't think it was so long. It was just
Okay.
personally, I'll tell you that, especially with those types of, there's so much new stuff that
There-
we have to have that in order to
There really
understand
is.
it. It isn't,
And-
it's gone over before.
And this year, this is the most change I've ever seen between the January budget and May revised.
And it's all positive, it's helpful, but it's new stuff.
So we do need approval?
Oh, I
Yes.
thought the Linwood budget had a lot more money
No,
on it.
that's
Oh,
not budget. That's
Yeah,
not
that's
budget.
just a revenue or expenditure. Linwood still does, and I'm not gonna remember off the top of my head, it was 2.5, and I think we borrowed the million, and we wrote out a whole MOU to ourselves to remind us that's just a borrowing. So, and then we also spent $312,000 purchasing the Shady property. So I think it's down to 1.1 or 1.2 million.
Any further questions? Sir, comments? Do I have a motion? To approve the stated budget.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Limon, do I have a second?
Okay.
Seconded by Mr. Sherman. Any further questions? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Vicki. Item number 17, our inter-fund district loan resolution 2015-06. Mrs. Steph.
I'm not done. Okay,
Board members, I'd like you to meet Mrs. Stack.
I got all excited there.
Who's trying to
But
leave?
you know why you can be excited, because these really are.
Yeah, they are quick. Our next two items are just annual items that the state requires that we have a resolution to approve. In order for us to ever borrow from one fund and loan money to another fund, we need board approval. And so tonight we have a resolution requesting their approval for inter-fund loan transfers as needed.
Have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Sherman, seconded by Mr. News. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Approved. Item 18. Oh, no.
Nope, that's a resolution.
Megan, please.
Okay.
My coffee's kicking in.
Trustee Sherman?
Aye.
Trustee Nina?
Aye.
Trustee Mayor? Trustee Mayor?
Aye.
Trustee Zumwalt?
Aye.
Aye. My mistake. Okay.
Okay,
Motion carries. Item 18.
18 is a resolution basically declaring our intent for expending our Education Protection Act funds. These are from that famous Prop 30 and the increased sales tax, the increased income tax. The state requires us to have you approve a resolution noting that basically we have the sole authority to expend these funds, that they won't be used for salaries or benefits for administrators or any other administrative cost. And if you approve the resolution, you are approving, attached to the resolution, the very last page, is a very small page where we said our revenue for this year is $7.33 million, and our spending plan is instructional salaries and benefits, which is what we have spent it on each year for an equal amount.
need to come up with another acronym. The EPA scares me.
This-
Yeah, they should have had it just a different, at least one more letter of the alphabet in there or something. Okay, do I have a motion to approve resolution 2015-07?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Nunes, seconded by Mr. Mann. Megan, please poll the board.
Trustee Nunes?
Aye.
Trustee Mann?
Aye.
Trustee Sherman?
Aye.
Trustee Greenwald?
Aye.
Trustee Kardashian?
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to item number 19, which is our bid award for the Live Oak renovation project, Byron Woods. Welcome. I missed the last meeting. I don't know if you were on the agenda, but this is.
I missed the
my
last
first time
meeting
on the
also,
agenda.
so.
Okay, so this is your first time on the agenda. Welcome.
Thanks for having me back. We've got the bid award for the Live Oak renovation project. As you're aware, in May 2011, the presence of mold was detected in the Live Oak building. Since then, it's been vacant. In May 2014, we proceeded with the project based on assistance from the state and scheduled maintenance funding. We had a scope put together, project cost of $1.27 million. And in October of just last year, that scope was increased and the project cost was increased to $1.5 million. So, on May 27th of this year, we received 3 bids, and the lowest bidder was Marco Construction Group of Fresno. And you have attached the bid tabulation sheet. The total bid amount for the project, including the base bid plus all alternate bid items, was just over $1.75 million. Now keep in mind, that's the total bid. So looking at that, and based on our estimated project cost, the lowest base bid is $1.546 million, which is $272,000 over the planned construction budget. So as a result, after speaking with Christine, we are recommending to use the $250,000 of carryover balance generally held for rainy day reserve available in our facilities budget. So she mentioned we have about $1.3 million in the facilities budget, the rainy day fund. So $250,000 of that would go to fund this project. Another funding source, you'll notice at the bottom of your agenda item, a couple different funding sources. There's Measure I bond interest, $642,000. State scheduled maintenance, $634,000. Facilities department funds, that'd be the $250,000, and capital project funds of $246,000. In case you're wondering, there's of course a base bid. We have alternate number 1, which is replacing all the HVAC units on the roof. And then alternate number 2 was replacing all the exhaust fans in the building. Alternate number 3 was replacing the entry flooring on the building. So, facilities department has set aside some floor covering replacement funds from scheduled maintenance that we'd like to put forth towards this project to be able to replace all the flooring at the entry. So as a result, we'd like to recommend awarding the project the base bid and bid alternate number 3 in the amount of $1,553,664 for the Live Oak renovation project to Marco Construction Group of Fresno.
Any questions? On this board? John?
I know a good bit of this happened before you got here, but can you talk a bit about why you think the bids came in higher than the original estimate?
Sure, you know the bids, there's one that's a little bit high than the other two, but the other two, bid number 1 and bid number 2, they're pretty competitive. I have a feeling prices are going up in general, and I think contractors are busy, and this is kind of a medium-sized job for around here. I think it's the price of materials. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns in that project too. I mean, you can walk through and see we're dealing with mold. We're gonna have to uncover the walls, and as soon as the walls come down, there's gonna be a lot of hidden things in there too, so. That's the hunch that I have.
Okay. It fits what I heard too, but I'm just surprised that it wasn't anticipated there. Were you surprised at that? Or?
I was surprised it came in high, to tell you the truth.
You were surprised at the bid.
Right.
You didn't have reservations about the estimate from Kim.
No. So I think I saw it, Well, it was tough because I didn't know the scope of work. I came in after the fact, so they went out to bid and they had these drawings, and I'm just looking through it after the fact, walking through the building. I don't have enough time to put together a $1.3 million estimate in my head, so.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Any further questions? If none, can I ask for a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the Live Oak renovation project as described, which includes alternate bid number 3.
Can I get a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, our last item of the evening, Mr. Woods, is our 5-year construction plan.
Yes, before you, you have the 2017 to 2021 5-year construction plan. This is a requirement by the Chancellor's Office to be submitted on an annual basis due July 1st. And it is, in a nutshell, it is outlining the construction plan for the next 5 years. So what big projects do we have that we're requesting state funds for? Sometimes you'll also include 100% locally funded projects on that list. I have put together in the attachments the list of projects that we have in Fusion by priority. So we are proposing this year to just roll last year's plan forward, no changes made to the priority of the projects. So I'd like to just go through the projects with you so you understand where we're at and what we're planning on for the next couple of years with the state. So the project list, at the top of the list, number 1 is phase 1 of the site development facilities at Tulare. Now this is completed, it just needs to be closed out in Fusion. So that's something we'll take care of. The number 1 priority project that we'll be requesting state funding is number 2 on there. Tulare Center Phase 2, the academic buildings. Now these are new lab buildings, 32,000 square feet. Status of it, it has been approved. The final project proposal was approved last year by the Chancellor's Office. So we've got an occupied date set for 2020/2021, $37.8 million project cost there, construction cost.
Byron, real quick before you hit these others, could you, for just the benefit of the board and maybe a refresher for some, give a quick explanation of Fusion?
Fusion is, it's an acronym, stands for Facility Utilization Space Inventory Options Net. Which doesn't really make sense when you put all this together. But it's a database, and in that database there is a project section, project planning, and there's a few other modules that I use in there as well. But what it does is it includes all of our space inventory. So all the spaces on the facility, on the campus, are logged in there. So they're stored in there. So I've got the square footage, the number of stations. So it's the database the Chancellor's Office looks at, keeps track of your campus. So within Fusion, you will also submit your projects, initial project proposals, final project proposals. And for example, you've got the list of them right in front of you. So the Chancellor's Office will look at that, make adjustments. Projections are also listed in there. We submit our scheduled maintenance special repairs projects through there. There's numerous things that you submit to the Chancellor's Office.
So it's a dedicated software system, but
It
it's
is.
also considered our most valid, most verified, and accurate information.
Correct. Yeah. And each district has their own specialist that they talk to up there. So I spent quite a bit of time in the last couple of weeks talking to our specialist, making sure that we're on the same page. She understands what we're submitting and what we expect in the next couple of years as far as planning goes. So in space inventory, we actually submit our space inventory in the fall, and that would affect the submittal of these projects in July 1. So you'll see some of these as I go through them. I'll kind of point out a couple things real quick so you can understand the effects of submitting the space inventory. Like I said, Tulare Center Phase 2, right now, each project is scored out of 200 points. Tulare Center Phase 2 scores 94, I think. And the categories for that project, the score is based on enrollment growth, you can get 50 points for that. Existing inventory, you can get up to 50 points for that. ASF change, which is your square footage change, up to 50 points. And then your local contribution, which you can get up to 50 points for. Since Tulare's really new, since we just built a bunch of buildings out there, we don't yet qualify for all those categories yet. So we're scoring 30 points in enrollment, 16 out of 50 in existing inventory. The square footage change is 48 out of 50, so our total is 94. So as far as space inventory goes, in October, I'm gonna take a really close look at how we're coding our spaces to make sure that they accurately reflect what we have in Fusion to be able to take advantage of the point scales. So a good example of that is the number 3 project we have, Basic Skills Center for Visalia. So Basic Skills Center is the #1 priority project on this campus, and it is replacing the existing Buckeye and General Grant buildings with a new Basic Skills Center, approximately 15,000 square feet. When I got here, that project scored 120 points out of 200, and you get 120 points based on the age of the facility, so that was a slam dunk. Those buildings are 50 plus years old. So looking in Fusion, under the space inventory, if you activate inactive space right now, you can get up to 30 more points. For some reason, when this was submitted, we had 0 points out of 30 in that category. So I went back and talking with the specialists, we were able to acquire those 30 points, and now the project scores 150 out of 200, which is perfect. As long as you're not putting up your own local contribution.
I'm still stuck back in
Sure.
the century. And which ones are the Buckeye and Grant buildings?
Buckeye and General Grant over here in the corner.
What was industrial
Meadow.
technology?
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Industrial Technology, formerly Foundation Office too, I think.
Right.
Right.
So to score 150 is pretty high on the priority list. If the next, and when the next state facilities bond passes, that's our kind of boardwalk and Park Place. That's our project that's gonna get us the 100%
So
funding.
going back to number 92, you said it's 94 points. Where's
For
the
Tulare.
line? Yeah, where's the line get drawn?
Right now, since there hasn't been a statewide bond since 2006, I've heard of quite a few projects that are up around the 150s, 140s to 150s. Tulare gonna take a while. They have a lot of square footage out there that they aren't occupying. So what we're really gonna need to do is get our enrollment growth up.
Yeah.
Like I said, we'll take a look in space inventory and see how we're coding our spaces. That number will keep on going up. The score will keep increasing every year. It's just gonna take some time. So like you mentioned, the state bond, we submitted this year, 2015, in anticipation of a 2016 bond passed in November 2016. If it's passed in November 2016, these projects get funded by priority. I think the state is committed to funding at least, or I think they said 1 project per campus. So as long as the project scores well, competitively with the other projects throughout the state, you'll get 1 project funded per campus. So I said Visalia is a slam dunk, the Basic Skills Center. Tulare, as it sits right now, I doubt it would get funded just based on its current situation. And then Hanford, we don't have anything set in Hanford because we're still growing out there as well. So Hanford and Tulare in similar boat. Your number 4 project is the current building modernization. Now this is only an IPP approved project, which is the initial project proposal. Very basic. We just submit a proposed project to the state and they say, yeah, that sounds like a good project. Next year, why don't you put some numbers to it and see and roll it forward and see how it scores. So that's the second priority for Visalia, and that's a current building modernization, modernizing the existing current building to 26,000 square feet. You'll see the occupancy date is also a year out, 2021-22, at a cost of $16 million. And last on the list for the Visalia campus is the M&O renovation, and that's renovating the existing Cedar building, which is the wood shop and metal shop building, and converting that into an M&O building and vacating the Valley Oak and Wenatchee buildings, which are out by the track, the southwest corner of the track area, old racquetball court buildings. So keep in mind, like that's an IPP as well. Each year, so from now on, we're going to submit this in July 1. After July 1, I have plans to just hit the deck running with the staff here, with committees, as far as putting together a real detailed outlook on a facilities master plan. I mean, an outlook that 10 years out, 20 years out.
So you'll be working on some
So
more.
this is probably going to change quite a bit next year. But I would say right now, our #1 priority for Visalia Basic Skills Center, slam dunk, let's move forward with it. So with that, I'd like to recommend that the Board of Trustees authorize the 2015 submittal of the 2017 to 2021 5-year construction plan.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Sherman, can I get a second?
Second, and I have a quick question.
Seconded by Mr. Williams, what's the question?
Byron, are your dates at the top of the sheet here, are they,
Yeah, 2017.
19th, is that,
It's supposed to be 2017. Yeah. Because that's
We're
when the
way
funding,
ahead. We
yeah,
won't
the
be
funding
here.
takes place.
I'll be back 29.
It was 21, so.
well, John still might be on the board then, but I'm not sure.
You'll have 3 diamonds by then.
Off subject, but I just talked to the trustee, named Edna Ivins, she's at West Hills. I know I agree with West Hills does, but I have a lot of admiration for her. She did not run again after her 48th year in service.
Oh, my
Yeah,
goodness.
wow, she retired.
She's a nice lady.
That's great. That is.
Did we vote on this?
Yes.
You have a motion? No,
It's-
I'm-
it's-
We have a motion, but I don't think we voted.
No,
No,
not yet.
It's
Not
been
yet.
moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Woods. Any further comments, questions? We had a few that stuck it out till the end out there, not many. Meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Come on, man. Come on.